Hello, my beautiful souls. Welcome to another show on Living Naturally with Michaela Live, where we talk about all things for living a naturally healthy life. Welcome to today's episode where we are going to be talking about a topic that is very timely right now. So I'm your host, Michaela. I call myself the Mind Body Connection Specialist for obvious reasons. And joining me today is the lovely Dr. Michelle Greenwell of the Greenwell Center for Holistic Health, who is our resident movement specialist. So spring is a season of renewal, and it's the perfect time to support our body's natural ability to detox. But did you know that your lymphatic system has no pump like your heart? It relies entirely on movement, breath, and gentle stimulation to function properly, which is one of the reasons why we're going to be talking about this today with Michelle, because she is, like I said, our movement specialist, and she deeply understands how mindful movement supports our body's natural detox process. So let's welcome Michelle to the show. Thank you for joining me again, Michelle. I always enjoy our conversations.
Lovely to be back. It's so great. And this topic is awesome.
Yeah, I was when I was trying to decide what we were going to talk about this week, I kind of had this idea of, you know what, let's just kind of make the whole month be, like this theme of spring and renewal and everything, because spring is a really good time for that type of activity, renewal in mind, body, and spirit, because the earth is renewing and turning over and transforming. So it's a good time for us to do the same. And you being the body specialist, I'm taking this opportunity this week to talk about renewal in the body. And I thought the lymphatic system in particular was a good way to start, because spring, again, as I said, spring is also a good time for detoxification as well. And the lymphatic system is so important in our detoxification process. So let's talk a little bit before we get deep into the conversation about why the lymphatic system is so important in the detoxification. So can you explain what the lymphatic system does and why movement is essential for keeping it flowing?
Well, like you said, the fluids in the body don't just move because there's a pump like the heart has for circulation. The fluid in the body exists everywhere, and it needs this massaging action in order to inspire it to move through and to pull the toxins out and to bring nutrition back in. But it also connects to our emotions, and it connects to our brain. And our brain can't function if we're not moving. It needs that information to know how are the systems doing, what else needs to be engaged in order to get everything to go. And so there's a whole system that goes in. But if you pull movement out of your day and you're frozen in front of your computer, or you're stuck in the car in the same position that you've been in all day, you really are compromising the body's ability to take in the nutrients for the food that you eat, but also to get rid of those toxins that are building up.
Yeah, I have often heard the lymphatic system being described as kind of like a river with no movement. So if you don't have the push of the wind, or or oceans or whatever that's feeding into it, or it becomes stagnant, and that's where all of the sediment just kind of settles and collects in there. Does that seem like that's a really good analogy for the lymphatic system?
I love it. I love it. Yes.
Okay, so you agree with that. Okay, all right. So, many people experience what we call lymphatic stagnation without even realizing it. So, I'm all about one of the reasons why I call myself the mind body specialist, connection specialist, is because I spend a lot of time trying to help people understand the connectivity between the mind and the body, and how you can read cues from the body to understand what's going on in the mind, and and vice versa. And so one of the some of the common signs that can indicate um, that someone might need to support the lymphatic system, from my standpoint, would be like stuff like puffiness or fatigue or even brain fog, that kind of thing. So what are some other symptoms that you can you can tell people that they can look for to know that, hey, there's something going on with the lymphatic system and you really kind of need to do something about it? What are some other symptomology that can indicate that?
So you can have a breath that is shallow and the
Hmm.
diaphragm is stuck and it's not moving correctly. So you could have that. And you can have points in the body, reflex points in the body that hold a lot of pain. And so when you rub your hand past maybe the side of your leg, it's like, oh, I can feel that. That feels really tender.
Yeah,
That's an indication that the lymph is actually stagnating and it's not flowing through. And our legs, because we sit a lot,
yeah.
really do take the brunt of it, because there is this cutoff of flow at our waist, where our legs are always bent and also behind the knees. And
Hmm.
so you find that you'll have these little painful points that don't mean, they're not related to anything, but they'll show up that way.
Okay.
Um, yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Again, I like to give people, it's like, this is what you look for, or if you notice this, this is what it could mean. So, so it's as much about that as anything else.
Mm.
So, e- we'll go ahead and start off a little bit, because you're the movement person. So I'm probably going to be asking you all kinds of like little tidbits as we go along. If someone is feeling heavy or sluggish, from the winter, because, again, it's springtime. So this is the time where we can kind of start pulling ourselves out of that winter stagnation. So if someone is feeling heavy or sluggish from the winter, is there a simple movement that they can do to kind of um, start stimulating their lymph flow?
Yeah. And I'm going to, that I could do it through Tai Chi movement, but I'm going to take it one step over first. And I'm going to go to the neuroreflex points. And I should say neurolymphatic reflex points. So these are points originally discovered by an osteopath in the 1930s. So this is 100 years ago. And Frank Chapman discovered that if you rub certain points on the body, the
Mm,
organs and the glands would start to function better. And that was going to move the lymph. That was going to help with that flushing out part.
right.
But then Dr. George Goodhart found in the 1970s that there was a relationship of the muscles to the organs to the glands. And that
Okay.
was really important, because if you rub a reflex point and turn a muscle on, you get better functioning. What
Mhm.
happens with better functioning? You're going to move easier. So
Right.
before we even get to movement and making sure all the muscles actually are going to work, because some muscles will turn on, some will turn off based on how we're feeling, what you could do is you could rub these points. And you can just Google neuro lymphatic reflex points, and you'll see all kinds of charts that come up. And it has little lines for the body. And you
Right.
can just start rubbing those points. And you'll find you'll start rubbing. So if I was to go on the front, you could go in between the ribs on the
Mhm.
front of the chest. And if I was going to rub there, you might start rubbing and it's like, oh, that's fine. I don't think there's anything really there. And then all of a sudden it starts to feel like it's bruised.
Yeah, you get that tender. Yeah.
Exactly. And then that's that indication that, oh, something is going on. So I need to spend a little bit more time here.
Yeah.
If you were to rub, there's all kinds of points on the front of the body and also down the spine, which are hard to get at ourselves, which is why you need movement. And then I could bring a Tai Chi movement in there. But the other is you could go to your legs. So you've got the outside edge of your legs, and you also have the inside. You have in
Mhm.
front of the pants seam and you have behind the pants seam. But what you'll probably find with the leg ones is as you start to rub, it feels like someone's just jabbing you with a pencil. Then you know you've got some real fluid blockage in there that's
Yeah.
holding things back. But the second is you start to feel in the tissue, when it first starts to go stagnant, it's kind of dough-like.
Hmm.
And it's like if you wanted to play with bread dough. But then if you don't do anything about it, it starts to turn into these little balls. And at first they're just kind of jelly-like, but then they start to get harder the longer
Hmm.
that toxin sits in there, and then you end up with these bubbles. So being able to notice where you are with how much toxins might be sitting there, but also how things are pocketing and not moving, that can be a great indicator. So rubbing those points can be a fantastic thing to do first thing in the morning. Now you start doing rubs and you're going up and down different parts of the body. You get on the spine or on your back, you're also moving at the same time. So
Yes.
you can even just those couple, I can already feel tingling and almost goosebumps. And it's like everything all of a sudden woke up and is ready to go. That would be the first start of getting movement going. And those reflex points are going to turn the muscles on. They're going to inspire the organs and the glands. And that's what you need to get those things pumping and moving those toxins through.
Okay, well, there you have it. Yeah, something simple and easy that you can do. And we like simple and easy because then you have no excuse not to do it. So, all right, so now that we understand a little bit about the lymphatic system, why it's so important, let's talk um, a little bit about the role of gentle movement in the lymphatic flow. So, so Michelle, many people think that they need intense exercise to detox. But gentle movement is actually more effective for the lymphatic system. So, can you share how Tai Chi movement specifically can help stimulate the lymphatic flow?
Mm-hmm. So you have, if you're thinking about movement, so if you go for a run and you work out really hard, you do that to sweat to get the toxins out.
Hmm.
That's what we think about. But when you've got these pools happening inside, if you push, 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 it's like going against the wall and you never get anywhere. But if you were to spiral, you can move a lot more and you can
Right.
inspire things to stretch and move in different ways. So in Tai Chi, we have a spine rotation. We have several different spine rotation movements that we could do. And the lymph nodes that go down the spine, the reflex points we can rub on our backs on the outside, but the lymph nodes are all on the inside. And so if we do some movements that keep our back from not moving too much, like if you're running,
Hmm.
you're not going to get that pumping action happening through there. But if you gently massage by rotating, then you start to do this pumping action. And that's inspiring the fluid to start to move through, but not all at once that it's going to hit the wall. It's one side, then the other side. So I know you can only see the top half of me. And there's different ways that we could do rotation in different arm positions. But the easiest one is if people think about holding on to a balloon or a ball and just putting the energy in the center of their hands, reaching that out so the hands are beyond the knees if you're sitting down. And then
Hmm.
you're just going to move until the ball is over top of one knee and then go back to the center and then over top of the other knee. And you want to move really slow and gentle. And you'll notice how the spine starts to rotate. And that rotation is pumping those little nodes all the way down the spine. And that's inspiring every organ system, the glands related to the organ system, and the muscles related to that system as well. So you're
That
turning muscles on, moving fluid through, and then you have a really good chance of getting any toxins out of the muscle in a much gentler way than doing that hard run where it's going to be using up energy, but it's not necessarily going to be detoxing within the tissue.
Gotcha. Gotcha. So, all right. So let's keep moving here. So we've talked a little bit about the role of gentle movement. Um, I've lost my train of thought. See, this is what happens when you go live. So it's been one of those days. Okay, so we've been talking a little bit about the role of gentle movement in lymphatic flow, and you don't really need to have you know the intense exercise. So I personally, one of my favorites, and we're going to talk a little bit later too about different tools that you can use. My favorite actually is rebounding. I love my little mini trampoline. I keep one in my office, and I periodically get up and bounce on that. And it's like just a couple minutes, each hour when I get up, when I stand up, it does so much to kind of get things moving and to help me feel so much better. But there are some other ways too, besides the movement as well. So breath work can actually also be a real good part of this as well. So let's talk a little bit about breath work. Now, the way that you approach breath work and the way I approach breath work is a little different because I come at it more from a yoga standpoint. And of course, we know that Tai Chi is, so we know that Tai Chi though is, it's kind of a combination of the movement and the breath work together, and the movements of the Tai Chi, it influences the breath and vice versa and all that stuff. So I'm going to let you kind of get into that. But from my standpoint, when it comes to detoxification, I find that diaphragmatic breathing can act as a natural pump for the lymphatic system. And so things like box breathing or alternate nostril breathing can also enhance the oxygenation and detoxification of the body. Whereas the opposite of that, stress and shallow breathing actually can restrict the lymphatic system, which actually makes detox less effective. So, what do you feel about the role of breath work in detoxification and the lymphatic system? What's your standpoint on this?
Mm-hmm. Well, if you look at how we deal with stress and emotions, many of us breathe shallow. So any kind of breath work is going to be helpful if you spend all of your time with shallow breathing, because you need to have deeper breathing.
Yeah.
The other thing is you need to have that diaphragm moving. As it goes up and down, it actually is massaging the kidneys, and the kidneys are part of that detoxing. And so if you're breathing shallow up in the top of your chest, those poor kidneys don't get the movement that they need. The emotions that sit on that system are fear and anxiety.
Yes.
And it ramps up nice and easy when everything is stagnant. So
Yes.
it's so important for that movement to be happening. The other thing is the top half of the body needs to connect to the bottom half of the body. And if that diaphragm, which is the center pillar, is stuck, then there's no communication going back and forth between those two planes, and you need to have that. So the diaphragm plays such an incredible role in how we function, how we think, and how we feel or express our emotions.
Yeah. Yeah. I like that because that just shows how just being mindful of the way that you move can address other things that are going on and how it's all interconnected. And again, that's one of the things that I talk so much about. I know people get tired of hearing me, talk about it, but it's like, I'm going to keep talking about it until you get it. So, but yeah, I love that you shared that because yeah, the kidneys is part of that detoxification process. And right now we're talking about, the lymphatic system in particular, but there are so many other organs that are part of our natural detoxification process. So I love that you brought the kidneys in, because the kidneys is part of that as well. And breathing and the way that you breathe can actually help stimulate that by exercising those kidneys. It's almost like it gives the kidneys like a little massage, if you will. So, and you know, we're talking about breathing, and you might be going, "Oh my gosh," it's like, "Oh, it's so much." But just as simple as, just when you're breathing, focus on expanding your stomach, and that's what that diaphragmatic breathing is coming from, rather than expanding your chest. Just think about it in that type of
Mhm.
manner. And that's what's going to put the air in where it needs to kind of massage those kidneys, and, to help them move stuff along. And there's nothing wrong with chest breathing when you need it, when you need to fill your lungs up. But just kind of think about how you're breathing and how it affects different parts of the body, and how changing that breath up can be beneficial at different times. So that's all I'm saying. And there's nothing really complicated about it, really. You just do it. Once you know what to do, you just do it. There's nothing really complicated about breathing. So just breathe. All right. So
And in
go
I
ahead.
just was gonna put in there, in Tai Chi, we have the seated, Danyu, and it would be arms only.
Okay.
And you could do it standing as well. But for people who might have trouble finding that deep breath, or even realizing how breath should be different because they're so used to the breath they use all the time, that
Hmm.
if you take your palms up and you pull the hands forward, turn them over, and then bring them back towards the body. And as you lift the arms up, it actually is going to change the position of the diaphragm. And
Okay.
that's what gets that breathing action happening without thinking about the breath. Because you just start moving, and then pretty soon the diaphragm's like, oh, I like this. And it just starts going deeper. And it's that nice, gentle movement, like you were saying. And you'll notice that with the way the arms are moving, we're starting to get that pull in the tissue coming through the arms and the chest, and actually even down into the groin. We've got lots of lymph nodes in the
Yeah.
groin, small intestine, and all of those are getting pushed on and pumped. And just that tiny little action, all related to the breath, helps to move that lymph through. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. I was actually about to ask you if you had any, quick little exercises or something that, that could be done to help with that. So you read my mind. So, all right. So, we've been talking about having to move everything through and everything. But what happens when you haven't been doing that, and you are, you know, now in a stagnant mode? What do you do then? So let's talk a little bit about stagnation and being able to release that. So we know that physical stagnation and emotional stagnation often goes hand in hand, because the body and the mind are deeply connected, especially when it comes to detoxification. You may not realize that, but it is. There is everyone hears the saying about, what you feed your body and your mind. So just think about when you're nourishing yourself, you have to nourish both your body and your mind. And so on the flip side of that, when there's stagnation in the body, there's also stagnation in the mind, and vice versa. Many times when you have emotional stagnation in the form of like stress or grief or anxiety, as we've already been talking about, some of those emotions that are involved in this, that can contribute to physical stagnation as well, which leads to sluggish lymph flow. And inflammation, because if you think about lymph that runs through the body, that is part of this detoxification process that carries the toxins out of your body, helps it move through. When that's not happening and our body is holding on to those toxins, that leads to inflammation, because those toxins is creating an inflammation response in the body, because the body's like, okay, what do I do with all this, because I'm not supposed to have that. So let's talk a little bit about things that we can do to help release that stagnation, that tension that is stored in the body. Because tension, I always start with tension because everybody understands tension, and it's an easy concept. And tension is generally stress, and stress is leads to inflammation. So it's all connected. So if we can bring it back to the simplest term, tension. Let's look at tension. Everybody understands that word, and they understand tension in the body. So because of this mind body connection, you have to start asking yourself, if I have some stored tension somewhere in my body, what does that mean? So, Michelle, how can stress, emotions, and even trauma contribute to lymphatic stagnation?
We freeze. We freeze, and then things cannot move. So those situations, and if we don't address them and we just let them, we push them down, maybe, because that's one way of dealing with things. You might push it down, but you also might just push it aside, and then it keeps popping in and out. And what that means is you've got emotions that are going to ramp up, shut some systems down, and then other emotions that are going to shift in, and then they'll turn other systems off. So we get a really big imbalance running through the systems. And what we want to do is have that nurturing going through all the time. And so if you notice your neck is tight, it's telling you there's tension. If your lower back is tight, it's telling you stress is too much. And one way that we can know where we're at with our stress, because in our minds, particularly those of us who are go-getters and 150% is the way we like to work. I'll just say that. We go, yes, I'm fine. But one way to gauge that is if you pull on the top of your ears and see, are you actually sitting or standing with full integrity in your posture? And if you had to go from a slouched position, you pulled on the ears and it was like, oh, look at how much movement I've got. And now my chest is raised and I can actually take a deep breath. That tells you how much stress is on the system. That means all in that posture you're holding, the lymph has just stopped and your breath has stopped. So we really have to be able to pull that out. But then that's also looking at our emotions. And guess what happens when you move? When you move gently, you're doing a little tug on the tendons and the relationship between the muscle to the tendon to the bone. And it's like fine-tuning an instrument. You're tuning it up to be able to play with all the other fiddles.
Yeah.
You want your fiddle to sound as good as the next. That you need those tendons all tuned up so that the systems are functioning, the muscles are working with integrity. And that's that soft, gentle movement. It could be as simple as turning the hands.
Yeah.
Just that nice, gentle piece. And we need that bit of movement to start to move those emotions through.
Yeah.
And it was interesting. I learned yesterday, I didn't realize this, but we talk about the vagus nerve and we talk about the nervous system, and this is all going to affect the lymph flow. And the vagus nerve is 80% based on our sensory function, only 20% physical. Yet we tried to address the vagus nerve by doing physical activities. And I'm not going to say that the slow, gentle motion pieces, but it's like you need to go de-stress for certain things. But if you start to look at the five senses, have you have you even been aware of what things smell like? Have
Right.
you been mindful about what you're up to? And then thinking about, what did I hear? What does it sound like? What do I taste? What have I been saying? What words have been coming out of my mouth? Oh, I'm so stressed. Oh, I'm rushed. Oh, and if those are all the words coming out, that's how you're filtering into that lymphatic system. And you're giving it clues that it needs to stop, because you need to just like be still. Instead, if you stop to be still with the senses and aware, doesn't mean that the lymph has to stop moving, but you can definitely change your emotions so that the lymph then has this opportunity to become involved in being moved.
Right. And we've had
That's probably a different
many.
answer than you were thinking.
No, 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 no. No, I was just gonna say we've had many discussions on movement for releasing emotions and trauma and all of that stuff. So if this is your first time watching us, you should go back and like find some of those other videos where we talked specifically about, using movement to release tension, release emotion, release trauma, and that kind of thing. So this just kind of just ties all of that back in that one thing helps the other, which helps the other. And so it's
Mhm.
it's like this circle, because it's all interconnected. It's all interconnected. And that's what we really want everyone to understand, is that there is a connection there. And being able to have proper movement benefits you in so many ways. Yes, today we are talking about the lymphatic system and being able to detoxify our bodies, but that movement can also help detoxify our mind from those negative emotions, from that tension, from that stress, from some traumas. So just think about that. It's like you can work on multiple things at one time with just
Mhm.
gentle, targeted, mindful movement. How
Mhm.
awesome is that? It's like
Mhm.
our bodies are just so amazingly made. How awesome is that? So, all right. So, you've already covered some of that. So, let's talk a little bit about blockages and emotional stagnation in particular. Okay. So let's talk just a touch more about that. What are some some emotional release movements that you would recommend for someone, for like um, possibly like shaking off tension? We already talked about the twisting and all that kind of stuff, but sometimes things just get so blocked that I feel like people just need a little bit more. So, what would you suggest for someone who just needs a little bit more?
I would say go to the feet. And the reason I say that is, we walk on our feet, we jump, we run, we push, we pick things up, and very often we ignore them. And our feet actually also are regulators, because how we push into the ball of the foot is how all the organ systems are inspired to function correctly. And if
Mhm,
you go into rubbing those feet, moving the toes, move them back and forth. So if you've got your toes, if you're trading them back and forth, you're putting space in between, you're rubbing on the top, which is going to be firing up different reflexes in the body and
mhm,
recoordinating. Those pieces are all going to be feeding information back to the lymph system on how things need to move and how they need to get going. And it also will inspire those people who have a lot of pain in their feet and ankles because of lymph swelling
yeah,
to start to move that fluid out of the feet so that they can walk, they can put their shoes on. And I think that's such an important piece for people to realize. It's just small little things can make the difference. It's not going to change overnight if you do it once and it's like, well, it didn't work. No, because it took a long time for that fluid to build up in your
yeah,
body, and the pain to arrive and sit in those joints, it's going to take time, and it's going to take attention and love to your body. And
Yeah.
then that's when you can start to really look at what emotions are there. But rubbing the feet, the ankles, just massaging the skin, when it's lovely if somebody else can rub the skin, but if we start to actually love who we are and start rubbing the skin nice and slowly, firm pressure, all of a sudden things start to wake up. You'll notice, you'll feel how things are starting to move. And I think sometimes when our joints hurt, we just try to not move them,
Yes.
right? We try to be immobile with it, or they're stiff, but you start to massage around there. It's like, oh, that feels pretty good. And then pretty soon you're rubbing somewhere else. And that's something you can do, whether you're seated, standing, driving in a car, easy to add into the day.
Yeah, so you read my mind again, because I was going to say, ironically, many people, when their body gets to the point where it's all swollen and everything, and they don't want to move, movement is actually the thing that's going to help that. So so yeah, so again, you read my mind again, because I was going to add that, is that just when you feel like I can't move and I shouldn't move, I don't want to move, movement is the one thing that's going to help alleviate that, so you can move even better. So, but you have to start, and it doesn't have to be extreme. Start with the small things. So, like Michelle was saying, it's like moving the toes, rubbing the skin, which, it's going to lead me into our next point, which is going to be, um, simple daily practices that we can do to not only support a spring detox, but our lymph system in general. We've already talked a little bit about some, few of the movements and exercises, and there are other things that we can do. And Michelle's going to love this, because I'm going to give her a big shout out here in just a minute. But so some things that you can do to help with holistic detox, um, things like dry brushing. I love dry brushing. And I'm not going to explain that one to you. You can look it up. It's just what it sounds like. It's you're getting, you can get like one of
Lovely.
the get one of the back brushes from the bath aisle in your favorite store, and use that, and you literally brush your skin dry. But there is a direction to it, so you might want to look that up, because you always want to be brushing towards the lymphatic out outlets. So look that up. So dry brushing, it's a great technique. Um, Lymphatic massage, not only massage from a masseuse, but even lymphatic self massage techniques. Again, you can look those up. And Michelle's already talked a little bit about that. But then here's one of my favorites. And this is where Michelle's going to just absolutely just hydration and herbal teas for lymphatic drainage. And the reason why I say Michelle's going to love that is because she is also our resident tea master as well. So I'm going to let her take over a little bit of this for the moment and talk to us a little bit about herbal teas that are really good for detoxification and for lymphatic health.
Wow. So
I caught you
first,
off guard,
thank
didn't
you.
I?
First, thank you. The tea that I prepared today is Rising Tides, and it's part of the Teas with Intention series. And I'm just going to hold up the package. And I know for those people that are listening, they can't see. I don't know if I can get it here with the sun shining in, but there's a little blue circle. So it talks about, this is the water element. So this is for kidney and bladder. So we were talking about the importance of those systems to be able to flush the fluid out. You get it moving, you've done dry brushing, but then you need to get the fluid moving. And so this is a way to support that system and help give it a little bit of a lift up. So rather than thinking about which herb would be really good for lymph block, instead of going that way, you go with which set of herbs provide emotional support and work together to be able to help the whole body come into balance. So I'll say it that way, which is a little
Yeah.
bit different for thinking about it. But this one is white mistletoe, bean hip, St. John's wort, birch leaves, ginkgo biloba, stinging nettle, and lemongrass.
Mm.
And it's definitely an herbal blend. So
Yes.
it's it's got that herbal feel to it in a very light color, very light flavor. And it does have a beautiful aroma. So when we bring in the senses, one of the things with tea is first thing that's going to happen is you're going to smell. That
Hmm.
smell immediately goes into the limbic system and it starts to calm the system, but it also
Hmm.
connects to the motor system. So by drinking the tea, you're actually going to be engaging yourself in moving just by the action of it. The affirmation that's on this package is the water element is supported by a nourishing wave of power that sifts into each cell to allow unspoken dreams to be touched. So if you think about the stagnant things, the things you haven't done, the stuff you didn't get done,
Hmm.
all that stuff, this is just going to wash that through and open it up. So that would be one option. But the
Hmm.
other option with teas, yes, you can look at herbal, but you also have the antioxidants of the green teas and the black teas.
I
And
love
black
green
tea is
tea.
also and black tea is really good for joints.
Yeah.
And I didn't realize that because I was sticking to just herbal teas. And then when I started bringing the black teas into the tea company and choosing the different black teas, a really good organic black tea, the joints feel fabulous. So from a fluid retention perspective, it starts to flush the system out.
Yeah.
So there's a lot you can do with tea, and then it's a matter of what are your habits in the day? When are you going to be drinking the tea, and how much water have you been drinking? So if you drink
Yes.
black tea, you're going to dehydrate. If you
Right.
just stick to that, no water. So you definitely want to be having a water possibility going on of starting the day with water and then move to some tea and then fill that up with maybe some herbal tea later on if you started with black. Yeah, good question.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Well, generally, I ask you what do you have in your cup when we start our show, and I didn't today. So I wanted to
Mhm.
come back around to it because I knew you would have, some very great information to share with people about teas and how it can be used to help with what we're talking about. So thank you for sharing your knowledge with us. So some other
Mhm.
things you can do too, since we're talking about daily practices, it's important to also do stuff daily that is going to encourage that movement and keep you going. So let's talk a little bit about routines because I find that when we're trying to do something daily, okay, so I'll back up. It's not about doing it daily, it's about consistency. And in order to be consistent, adopting daily habits helps with that consistency. So, what are some good routines that you feel like that people can adopt that can help in the long run? So, do you have any particular routines that you would like to share?
I do actually, since you put it in that way. I was thinking, I wonder where I would want to go. But one of the first things would be before you get out of bed, doing the foot rub. And the
Mm,
feet first foot rub will engage all of the systems, get the joints mobilized, and then allow that lymph to start flowing. So that would be the first one. And sitting on the side of the bed, you can also do the seated Donu, just hands
mhm.
only if you wanted, or you could do seated to standing. Seated to standing means you're going to be moving the hip joint, and that is really important for getting that fluid flow all the way from the feet
Yeah.
through the body and back and forth. And that would be just your initial start. I have a special cup of tea each day, and it's got an
Mm,
affirmation that goes with it. So if I make a cup of tea, then I can, a cup, if I make a pot of tea, then I know that I will continue to drink through the day. And if I do it that way and I don't drink everything, I put it in the fridge. And that's when I go to the fridge for, looking, grazing, not quite sure what I'm looking for. And I go, oh, tea. And then I'll pull the tea out. And that's another way for me to engage with the herbs and with the chance of hydration. And then the other piece would be from there, making sure you check in with that posture. How much through the day are you sitting up straight? Some people haven't realized they never sit up straight. But even
Yeah.
just doing that action is going to change your breathing, and it's going to change the way the muscles balance with each other, which is those systems then are going to be supporting the lymph to be actually able to move through. Those are just right off the top of my head.
Okay.
And the other one that I wanted to make sure I mentioned was the spiral action. So in Tai Chi, we do brush knees and ward off monkey. And the brush knee action has a spiral of the leg, and then it has a change in the hip. And that is so important for getting that fluid to move through the legs into the core of the bodies. You were saying you want to get the lymph to the right spots so it
Yeah.
can clear it out.
Yeah.
And that's one of them. And the hand that you use creates that spiral of pushing on all those lymph nodes. So you have this beautiful flushing action that comes with brush knees. So I wanted to make sure to share that, because a lot of people won't really think about rotating a limb, like turning the hand or turning the foot. They'll be thinking more about straight on kinds of actions. And I think rotation is so important.
Okay, well, thank you. Thank you. So, Michelle has all of these movements and stuff on her channel. So, you can check out her channel and just look up the ones that she mentioned, and you can find them there. So, as for me, I'm probably going to look up some of those myself and maybe incorporate those. For me, my favorites right now, as odd as it sounds, is I get up, and one of the first things I do is I actually like to get on my rebounder the first thing in the morning, and it kind of gets things moving. It also kind of raises my energy. I am so way back when, and I'm going off on a tangent here in a little bit. Way back when, I read this great book that was called The Power of When, and I discovered that I was one of those people that have what they call the inverted rhythms. And so I never could understand why I always needed a little pick me up in the morning, because I just could not get moving in the morning. But then I found my rhythm at the end of the day. And that's when I was, more active and had more energy. So I literally have to do things in the morning to help stimulate my energy and kind of get things moving. So one of the things I like to do is actually get on my rebounder as one of my first things that I do during the day, because it picks up my energy and it just happens to help, with getting the lymph moving too. So that's one of my favorite things. So I would suggest that everyone just look at taking small sustainable steps that they can do every day to encourage that consistency. Find something that you like, that's fun, that you're going to want to do, and then put it into action. One of my other favorites, I have a vibration plate. I like to get on my vibration plate and just stand there and let it do all the work for me, So that's also another thing that, you could utilize as well. I mean, you don't have to have um devices or, equipment or anything like that. Yes, I utilize equipment because that's my favorite thing to do. You don't need the equipment to do it. You can do it just by your own movement and your own action. So discover what it is that you can do, that you can stick to, that and when you enjoy it, you're going to stick to it probably better than you would if you didn't enjoy it. If you didn't enjoy it, you're probably not going to do it. So start with something you like. So let's talk just a little bit more. So I'm a big proponent of you can do anything for 5 minutes. So 5 minutes a day. Start with 5 minutes a day. What's the best thing if they carved out 5 minutes in a day? What do you feel, in your opinion, is the best thing that they can do to support the lymphatic flow?
So I would go to that neurolymphatic reflex point rub. And that one you can do in probably 2 to 3 minutes. If you have some points that are really tender, you might want to go back to them at another time in the day and just spend some more time with them. But then I would go to something that would spiral. So that spine rotation, and there's lots of different examples of spine rotation on my YouTube channel. And then I would go to the Donu and just get that diaphragm really moving so that you're already breathing deeply as you go into your day. So those 3 things you could do in 5 minutes, and all your systems would be rebooted, so you'd be ready to go. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. And for me, I would say if you couldn't do anything else, go sit and breathe for 5 minutes. Just focus on breathing from the diaphragm, which is
And
like,
if we ask,
I'm sorry, what were you going to say?
I was
Yeah.
going to say, and if you asked Marian Egan, who is one of your guests as well for the shows, she'll do her crocheting while on her rebounder. So she gets a 2-for-1 with when she's doing her rebounder.
Yeah, I'm always game for anything that allows me to be most efficient. So if I can do something that does multiple things at one time, I generally will go for that because that's me. I like to be efficient. But sometimes you just need to have just a little something. And I'm just trying to give ideas for people out there that they can choose from. So my challenge for those of you who are watching or listening, and even if you're watching this later on and not live, because this is a live show, as you can tell, and we're not going to cut anything out, so you're going to get it in all of its glory. I challenge you to pick one habit that you can try for the next week and see how it goes. And we would love for you to share your experience with us when you do that habit, whether it's going on Michelle's channel and grabbing one of her simple Tai Chi movements, or it's breathing, or it's massaging points. Pick something and see what it does for you. Because in the end, again, it's not going to happen overnight. That's why I want you to try it at least for a week. See, if something starts moving for you, because the mind and the body are all connected. And if you start doing something that's going to help encourage the lymph flow, which is going to help detoxify your body, your mind will also start to detox as well.
Mhm.
And you might notice that even if you haven't really started noticing physical changes yet, you might start noticing that maybe you're a little less negative. Maybe you don't dwell on certain things so much. Maybe something that somebody does doesn't irritate you as much. Those are all signs of detoxification. And again, everything's all interconnected. You can't separate it. So that's why we talk about this mind body connection. And whatever you do for one is going to affect the other. So, what are you going to do today? All right. So, we're getting close to the end of our time. So, I am just going to ask Michelle, what is her final takeaway? What would you like to leave the audience with today?
I think that for those people that have had swelling, fluid retention, they have habits. They don't want to recognize that those habits have contributed to what they're doing.
Mhm.
As all of us would like to think we're doing our best job ever, but we have our habits. And so to really look at what are the habits that might be contributing to that fluid staying on. And I know we don't always want to accept responsibility for the position we put ourselves into. We'd like somebody to give us the magic pill, but in order to really make the best change, is to really look at what is it we're doing that has gotten us to that place. And if it means for 5 minutes a day you make a change, that's awesome, because you're going to start to notice over time how that's going to start to change things. And it may not be overnight if it's a chronic issue that you've got.
Yeah.
You have to give it time and be consistent with it. And then really start to look at things and think, what else could I do? What else could I do? And you can walk yourself back out.
Well, there you have it. So this has been such an enlightening conversation about how movement, breath work, and mindfulness can help us detox naturally. Spring is a great time for you to think about a detoxification, not only detoxing the body, but detoxing the mind as well. This is because our bodies are naturally in a place to be able to do that. So there are things that we can do to encourage that. So that's why we're having these discussions, to give you the tools that you need that can help your body detoxify naturally. You don't have to go out and buy a detox kit and do all the smoothies. Although if you want to do that, you can do that too, But our bodies naturally detoxifies itself. And so we're trying to give you ways that you can help encourage that along and to be able to do it naturally. So, Michelle, thank you so much again for sharing your expertise and coming on to the show. I look forward to our conversations. You can catch catch a conversation with me and Michelle every first Friday of every month, where we talk about the body part of things, of the body, mind, and spirit. So she's our movement specialist. So I generally will, let her come in and just, give us all of the goods. So if you're into movement or want to move more, be sure to check out our shows when she's on. You can go back and look at some of the previous shows. There is actually a playlist on my channel that has all the shows in it. If you want to go back and look at some of those other shows, you can go on her channel if you want to learn more about Tai Chi and movement. Again, like I said, she's our Tai Chi expert, and she has a lot of great Tai Chi videos. I love her seated Tai Chi videos. They are ones that just about anyone can do. So I encourage you to look at those. Check out her teas as well. I love her teas. She gave us a couple of good examples of teas that would work really well to support this whole process if you're interested in that. And yeah, so that is it for today's show. Thank you all for joining us. Please come back again. If you found this episode helpful, be sure to like and subscribe and share with anyone who would benefit from these simple, effective techniques. And remember, wellness isn't a destination, it's your daily journey. Start small, stay consistent, and trust your body's natural ability to heal. All right, so until next time, stay well and keep moving. Bye.
Take care.
This episode is brought to you by Living Naturally for Life, the Greenwell Center for Holistic Health, and Cape Breton Tea Company. Comment, like, subscribe.